Sexuality is not just pleasure, it is power, identity, expression, and often repression. We live in a society that claims to be liberated, yet silently judges the very impulses that make us human. Today we will explore what Americans are truly drawn to behind closed doors. But more importantly, we'll uncover what those desires reveal about the human psyche. Number 8, it will shock you. Not because it's taboo, but because it holds a mirror up to your subconscious. Stay until the end, not for shock value, but to understand how your desires reflect your truth. This isn't about judgment, it's about awakening. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Let's dive into the most intimate corners of the American mind, and maybe your own. Desire is not a weakness, not a flaw, and certainly not a sin. It is a symbol. A deep personal emblem from the unconscious mind trying to speak through the language of craving. When we experience desire, especially sexual desire, we often feel shame, guilt, or confusion. We've been conditioned by culture, religion, and society to silence that part of ourselves. But Carl Jung taught us that what we repress becomes our shadow. It doesn't disappear. It simply grows stronger in the dark. The things we want most but fear to admit hold the key to understanding ourselves. Every act we fantasize about, every craving we feel, is trying to tell us something. It's not always about the act itself, it's about what it symbolizes. A desire to be dominated may not be about control. It might be about safety, about surrendering your constant need to lead. A desire to dominate might not be cruelty. It may stem from a yearning to finally feel powerful in a life where you often feel ignored. A longing for public intimacy could symbolize a thirst to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be unhidden. Every desire hides a deeper emotional truth. When Americans report their most common sexual interests, things like spanking, choking, roleplay, or submission, many are quick to judge. But judgment is ignorance masquerading as morality. What you call weird might be someone's path to healing. What you mock might be the only place someone feels free. The core problem is that most people never examine what their desires truly mean. They either act them out blindly or bury them completely. Neither leads to growth. But when you sit with your desire and ask, "What is this trying to tell me?" you begin the journey of integrating the unconscious. It's only when we strip away the shame that we realize how symbolic our instincts really are. Sexuality is not purely physical. It is psychological, emotional, spiritual. It's a mirror. What turns you on also turns you inward. That is the power of desire. The more you understand it, the more you understand yourself. But deny it, and you risk being controlled by the very thing you won't face. You see, people don't get addicted to desire. They get addicted to hiding from it. And what we hide owns us. So instead of asking, "Why do I feel this way?" ask, "What is this showing me about who I am?" Don't label it sinful, label it sacred. Because the truth is, your desire might be the first honest thing you've felt in years. And honesty, that's where true transformation begins. Vanilla is the word people use when they want to sound normal, acceptable. It's the label society created to package intimacy in a way that feels safe, clean, and digestible. But the truth is, most people who call themselves vanilla are hiding from their curiosity, from their questions, from the deep and silent urges that live underneath the surface. They follow the script, not because it's fulfilling, but because it's familiar. They repeat the same patterns, same positions, same routines, not because they don't wonder about more, but because they've been trained to fear that wondering. But curiosity doesn't die. It waits. It waits in quiet glances, in suppressed thoughts, in late-night imaginations that feel both wrong and real. Carl Jung would say that what you resist persists, and nowhere is that more obvious than in sexuality. Every individual has a natural curiosity. It's not always wild or extreme, but it is always there. A desire to explore, to understand, to push past the surface and touch something more raw, more truthful, more alive. The lie of vanilla is not that simplicity exists, it's that it's enough for everyone. It's not. Most people are pretending that what they've been told is all there is, pretending that they don't want more. Why do people silence their curiosity? Because they fear what it might uncover. They fear being labeled, judged, or misunderstood. They fear losing control. But curiosity is not chaos, it's clarity in disguise. It's the soul's way of pointing toward the next layer of understanding. To be curious is to be brave. It is the first step toward freedom. Because once you acknowledge that you want to know more, feel more, experience more, you begin to take back power from the conditioning that has kept you small. Americans are more curious than they admit. The rise of search terms, the explosion of niche communities, the quiet confessions made in anonymous forums, it all points to one thing: people are not as vanilla as they appear. Behind the performance of normalcy is a silent scream for expression, and that expression doesn't have to be extreme to be real. Even the smallest shift in dynamic, even the softest question asked aloud, what if we tried something new, can open a door to deeper connection, both with others and with self. Curiosity doesn't need permission. It doesn't need to be justified. It only needs to be listened to. Not every fantasy must be fulfilled, but every question deserves to be heard. Because in those questions lies the truth of who you are, and who you could become if you stopped pretending. Curiosity is the path. Deny it, and you remain asleep. Embrace it, and you awaken to a version of yourself that is no longer confined by fear or expectation. That's not perversion. That's liberation. Dominance and submission, those two words ignite immediate reactions in people. Some are intrigued, others uncomfortable, and many quick to judge. But few ever pause to truly understand what lies beneath those roles. Most assume it's about pain, control, or even violence. But that's a shallow interpretation. In truth, dominance and submission are not just acts, they are rituals. Symbols of something far deeper, an inner dynamic that plays out through the body, but begins in the psyche. Carl Jung would call it a shadow play, the dance between the conscious self and the parts of us we've hidden, denied, or suppressed. The desire to submit does not mean weakness. In fact, it often comes from the strongest individuals, the leaders, the perfectionists, the ones who carry the world on their shoulders. For them, submission becomes sacred. It's a moment to let go, to surrender the constant need to be in control. It's trust, not helplessness. It's the vulnerability of saying, I don't have to hold it all together right now. And in a world that constantly demands composure, that kind of surrender becomes powerful. On the other hand, the desire to dominate isn't about cruelty. It's not about ego. True dominance is not shouting or forcing. It's holding space, it's responsibility. It's the quiet, anchored strength to lead someone into their release, their surrender, their edge. Dominance, at its highest form, is not abuse. It is protection. It is awareness. It is the ability to guide without breaking. And for many, the desire to dominate arises from years of feeling ignored, unseen, or powerless in other areas of life. In stepping into that role, they reclaim something lost, not at the expense of another, but in partnership with them. This dynamic, this push and pull, is not unhealthy when practiced with respect, consent, and communication. In fact, it's deeply healing. Because in these roles, people face parts of themselves they cannot reach through logic alone. The one who submits confronts their fear of losing control. The one who dominates confronts their fear of taking responsibility. It's not about the physical act, it's about the psychological release. And that release can be a kind of therapy, a catharsis, a cleansing. So when we talk about dominance and submission in the context of American sexuality, we're not just talking about preference. We're talking about a growing number of people seeking deeper truth through embodied experience. They are not perverse. They are not broken. They are people who have found a language that finally allows them to speak their shadow, to bring the unconscious into the light, not through words, but through action. That's not shameful. That's revolutionary. Because when you allow yourself to engage with the roles your soul longs to explore, you don't lose control, you find integration, and in that integration, you find peace. Roleplay is often misunderstood. It's seen as playful, theatrical, even silly to some, but underneath the costumes and the scripts, something much more profound is happening. When someone slips into a role, they aren't just pretending, they're expressing, they are stepping into a version of themselves that often has no space to exist in daily life. It's not about faking, it's about freeing. The character isn't the lie. The real lie is the mask we wear every day to fit into the expectations of others. Roleplay gives people permission to explore parts of themselves that have been buried by routine, shame, and fear. It creates a sacred space where the subconscious can speak. Imagine someone who plays the role of a strict authority figure in daily life, a CEO, a teacher, a leader, in roleplay. They might choose to become submissive, vulnerable, even helpless, not because they're weak, but because their soul is craving balance. Or take someone who's constantly quiet, overlooked, dismissed. In roleplay, they might become bold, aggressive, dominant, not because they want to escape reality, but because they want to touch a truth that reality refuses to let them live. Carl Jung would tell us that these characters are not fabrications, they are fragments of the self, calling out for integration. When Americans engage in roleplay, they're not running away from who they are, they're trying to find out who else they might be. They are unbinding themselves from the narrow identity that society has given them. In pretending, they are revealing. In acting, they are healing. Because for many, the performance is the only place where authenticity feels safe. There's power in anonymity. There's liberation in playing a role when the world only allows you to be one thing. This is why roleplay is not just about fun, it's about truth. The truth that we are not one identity, we are many, and the roles we choose to act out often point to the needs we've denied. Someone who wants to play the nurse, the boss, the stranger. These aren't random choices, they're symbols. Each role represents something they need to express, understand, or reclaim. When we judge roleplay as silly or superficial, we're refusing to look deeper. We're refusing to see the soul behind the act. The real irony is that we think we're pretending during roleplay, but in many cases, that's the only time we're being honest. Every role we choose is a message from the inner world. A hidden part of the psyche stepping forward to say, this is also me, and I need space to exist. When people say they feel most alive during roleplay, it's not because they're escaping, it's because they're finally arriving, fully, unapologetically, and completely, as the version of themselves that no longer wants to hide. Group fantasies are often seen as the ultimate taboo, the final frontier of indulgence. They're whispered about in corners of conversation, dismissed as excessive, or written off as purely physical. But the truth behind these fantasies goes far deeper than lust. It's not just about bodies, it's about belonging. Carl Jung would have seen these desires as expressions of the fragmented self reaching out for wholeness, for unity. In a world where people feel increasingly isolated, emotionally distant and spiritually disconnected, the idea of merging with more than one other person isn't simply about pleasure. It's about dissolving the boundaries that separate us. It's about healing something that has been divided inside. Many people who fantasize about group experiences aren't just looking for excitement, they're seeking intensity, closeness, acceptance, without condition. In a group setting, there's less room to hide, fewer chances to curate the perfect version of oneself. Everything becomes more exposed, raw, human, real. In that shared vulnerability, people often feel something they haven't felt in a long time: connection. Not just physical connection, but emotional and even existential. It's an experience that breaks down individual walls, that dissolves the illusion of being alone. There's also a symbolic power in being witnessed, being seen by more than one set of eyes, being touched by more than one hand can awaken something inside that has long been asleep. It's not about being used or objectified, it's about being recognized. In a culture that promotes individuality to the point of isolation, many people long to be part of something bigger than themselves. Group fantasies become a metaphor for unity, for community, for spiritual merging. When people surrender to such experiences, What they often feel afterward is not guilt, but relief. As if something that was missing has been returned, as if they've found a way back to themselves, not through separation, but through others. These fantasies also challenge the rigid definitions of love, fidelity, and identity. They ask difficult questions. Can I love more than one person? Can I be open without being broken? Can I trust myself in the presence of many? Most people never act on these fantasies, not because they don't want to, but because they fear the unknown, fear judgment, fear what it might say about them. But the fantasy remains, not because it's dirty, but because it's meaningful. It symbolizes the longing to break out of confinement, to experience freedom in the most intimate way possible. What the group fantasy reveals is not depravity but desire for closeness, for authenticity, for unity. It is the fragmented self looking for its missing pieces in others. And if we stop judging these desires and start understanding them, we may just realize that what people are searching for isn't perversion, it's presence. A place where the self can expand beyond the limits of one-to-one intimacy and dissolve, even if just for a moment, into something larger, something whole, something free. Number 8 on the list will shock you, not because it's outrageous, but because it's common in thought, common in fantasy, and yet rarely spoken aloud. It will shock you because you've likely brushed past it in your own mind and quickly dismissed it, not wanting to admit its presence. But what makes number 8 truly uncomfortable is not the act itself. It's what it says about you, about what you long for, what you fear, and what you deny. And that's why you must confront it. Because the things that disturb you most often contain the truth you've been avoiding. Carl Jung said that the things we repress become the unconscious forces that rule our lives. That's exactly why #8 matters. It isn't just an activity, it's a psychological message wrapped in taboo. It exposes the part of your identity that you've pushed so far down, you barely recognize it. But the moment you see it, you'll realize it's been shaping your choices, your relationships, your boundaries, and your shame all along. The real shock is not the act itself, it's the realization of how much of your life has been built around avoiding it. We live in a culture that rewards control. We're taught to curate our desires, to sanitize them, to make them acceptable. But what if #8 isn't there to be tamed? What if it exists to provoke something real in you? A feeling, a truth, a memory. The shock it brings isn't accidental, it's a mirror. And the reflection it shows is one many people would rather not see. That's why so few talk about it, even though so many think about it. People tend to believe that confronting such desires will make them worse, that acknowledging them gives them power. But the opposite is true. What you confront, you begin to understand. What you understand, you can integrate. And what you integrate no longer controls you. Confronting the truth behind number 8 doesn't mean you must act on it. It means you stop lying to yourself about what's inside you. It means you reclaim ownership of your own unconscious. And in that confrontation, there is freedom. So when #8 is revealed, don't rush to reject it. Sit with it. Let the discomfort rise. Ask yourself, why does this make me feel something? What does it symbolize for me? What part of myself have I locked away that this brings to the surface? The shock is the beginning of awakening. It's a crack in the armor of your conditioned self. If you dare to look through it, you may see the raw, honest self staring back at you, unfiltered, unashamed, and finally awake. You must confront it because it's not about the fantasy, it's about your truth, and until you face it, that truth will continue to echo through your choices, your relationships, and your silence. Don't look away. Not this time. Sexuality is not just a series of preferences or acts, it's a profound reflection of the inner self. Behind every desire, every fantasy, lies a deeper truth waiting to be acknowledged. From dominance to roleplay, from curiosity to group dynamics, these aren't just behaviors, they are expressions of unmet needs, forgotten parts, and silent voices within. Even the shock of #8 isn't about the act itself, it's about the mirror it holds up to your unconscious. Carl Jung taught us that only by making the unconscious conscious can we take back control of our lives. This journey isn't about indulgence, it's about integration, about facing your full self without shame or fear. So don't dismiss your desires. Don't run from what makes you uncomfortable. Instead, pause, reflect, lean in. Because what you discover in that discomfort may be the key to your emotional, psychological, and spiritual liberation. Your truth isn't dirty. It's just waiting to be seen.